What's going on, everybody? DJ Valentine here right about now. How you doing? I want to talk about Marvel vs Capcom as a series. I know some of you are from the FGC here. You know what's happening with the hashtag FreeMVC2. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about that because I'm just repeating stuff that you've heard in a million other videos. But I just want to bring everyone else up to speed who don't know what's going on. Marvel vs Capcom 2 was a game released at the turn of the century, actually. And it's a very popular fighting game that is not on sale anymore. You can't get it anywhere due to licensing reasons or whatever. So a hashtag has been created to encourage people to support this campaign of trying to bring this game out of its dormancy. Which is cool because Marvel vs Capcom as a series brings together two companies that I greatly support. You know, Marvel and Capcom. Obviously, duh, it's in the name. But yeah, I've always really loved this series. It brings characters from both of these companies that I love and it mashes them together into a really cool fighting game. And, you know, I like it. This hashtag was started by Maximilian, hashtag FreeMVC2, to encourage people to show their support for the series, tell everybody why they love this series, why we want it to come back, why we want it to be an active series again. So that's what this video is going to be. It's going to be my contribution to the hashtag, to the discussion about Marvel vs Capcom as a series. And what I wanted to do is speak about what I would like the future to be. Let's just say that a Marvel vs Capcom 4 was going to happen. Let's just say that this hashtag, FreeMVC2, pays off, okay? Let's just say that Marvel vs Capcom 2 comes back, it sells incredibly well. It shows Capcom and Marvel that this series has a place on this market, and they decide that we are going to now commit to making Marvel vs Capcom 4. The last game in the series, Marvel vs Capcom Infinite, kind of did a couple of things wrong, and it kind of deaded this series at the moment, which is why we're now doing these hashtags. We're trying to show Marvel and Capcom, okay, MVCI didn't go as planned. It doesn't mean that this series should now remain dead, okay? Just because one game in the series kind of flops hard, we shouldn't cancel the entire series because there's so much here. And I think what Maximilian is doing with the FreeMVC2 tag is good because it's showing the love for one of the best games in this series, which is Marvel vs Capcom 2. And if it shows these companies that we love this series and we love this game in particular, and they go, okay, well, we've heard you, and we're gonna, you know, try and do something else with the series in the future. If Marvel vs Capcom 4 ever becomes a thing, I would like to imagine that they would make better choices for that game. So this is what this video is going to be about. I'm geeking out on nothing. There is no Marvel vs Capcom 4, but I would like to imagine one day there will be. And here's me daydreaming about what I think that game could be like. So right out of the gates, if MVCI taught us anything, it's when you're releasing your game, your base game from the get-go, do not gimp your roster. Okay, the roster, the starting base roster is going to be absolutely crucial into bringing in your first players, your audience, okay? If you have a roster and it's not speaking to people, and that's your base roster, you're stumbling out the gates in a really bad way. I think what they were going to do with MVCI, they were just going to keep adding characters as a service, we're going to keep adding characters, and that would work if the base roster was a substantial roster. But there was something about MVCI's roster where I wasn't really looking at anything there and going, yeah, I want to play that character, I want to try this game out. I looked at it and I was like, I'm not feeling it. So I'm saying for a Marvel vs Capcom 4, from the get-go, from day dot, okay, right from the jump, all good choices. If you need to get fan feedback and you have to put out some survey polls and you got to ask the audience, yo, if we were to make a Marvel vs Capcom 4, what characters would you like to see in the base roster? If you've got to be so blatant and open with it, then do it, but at least you're going to know right from the jump what characters need to be in the roster. It can't be no short man thing. It can't be like 4 characters and then we're going to release everyone over the next 10 years. Don't do that, okay? If you want this series to do well, you've got to bring everyone in from the ground floor on day one when you open those doors. You can't open the doors and go, oh yeah, we've got some things here on the table, we're bringing everything else in next week. Marvel vs Capcom 4, should it ever exist one day, has to have a substantially sick roster with enough variety and enough choice for people to come in and go, alright, now I've got something to work with. So first thing, Marvel vs. Capcom 4 absolutely has to have a sick roster with enough variety and selection from day one. Another thing they need to actually put into this game is rollback. Yeah, rollback netcode. The thing, I'm not even much of a online player. I tend to play single player a lot. I'm mostly, you know, a solo player kind of person. But I would be stupid not to include this here because I'm looking at what rollback is doing for the community, what rollback netcode is doing for games. Okay, I'm looking at all of that and I'm going, yo man, the life expectancy of these games is now tripling. Just because the online audience, the people who play these games specifically for online entertainment, they've got their rollback and they are committed. As long as the game plays well as well. Of course, the gameplay's got to be good. You're not going to play a shit game with rollback, are you? You're going to play a good game with rollback. So if Marvel vs. Capcom 4 comes out and the gameplay is solid, it absolutely has to have rollback netcode because there's going to be so many people that are going to appreciate that. To implement rollback into your game from the get-go is fine. If you're trying to implement rollback into a game that already has a delay-based netcode, yes, it can be quite difficult. But if you start building your game with rollback in mind from the beginning, it'll be a smoother journey. It'll be a smoother development process. So, yes, for Marvel vs. Capcom 4, rollback, put rollback right in there straight away. Don't even look at delay-based. Forget it. It's done. It's dead. That shit is dead. That shit is like Betamax. It's over. Dead as fuck. Rollback, look at that, pick that up, put it in your game. Everyone's going to be applauding you when you release a trailer and it says rollback netcode. Boom. Another thing I think they should do specifically with an MVC4 is when they begin development, in the concept stages, not even when they've started building the game, in the concept stages, okay? Capcom as a company should look at some key individuals within the community and speak to these people. There's a reason I say this. I'm not saying, oh, the fans know what they're doing more than the actual developers. No, of course not. The developers know what they're doing, but there's a difference with, just listening to any old fan and listening to the right kind of fan, okay? There are some fans out there who have genuinely good ideas. Look for these people, invite them round and speak to them. Get those ideas out of them because they've got some great ideas. They spend more time with your game than you have. They've spent more time over the years with this game. When you've gone off, Capcom, when you've gone off to make Street Fighters and God knows what else, these people stayed with Marvel. They stayed with Marvel vs. Capcom. They are continuing to play it to this day. They know your game. So I'm not saying bring all the fans in. I'm just saying look at your audience, look at your community, okay? Look at the Marvel vs. Capcom community and look at some key individuals in that community who know what they're talking about. Bring them in and listen to them. These people have the right intentions for your game. They want your game to do well and they've got the right ideas. So I think if they were going to make a Marvel vs. Capcom 4, it would be a wise decision to pick one or two people from here and there. These people, these core individuals from the community, bring them in, sit them down and talk with them about this and see what ideas they can bring to your new game. Alright, we're getting into the real daydreamy section now, okay? We're talking about like art direction and content and stuff. Now this is where I'm going off. I'm going off on a long one. So, you know, you better buckle up because it's going to be a bit crazy now. When it comes to Marvel vs. Capcom as a series, like Marvel vs. Capcom 3 had this sort of dark edged outline, like ink. They wanted to sort of make it look like the black parts and the characters were like ink from comic books. You can clearly see that Capcom wanted to do something like that. I mean, not everybody was a fan of it, okay? I'm kind of indifferent to the Marvel vs. Capcom 3 style. It's an aesthetic that works, but I think we are living in an age right now where you can do so much graphically. Like, there's some things that you can do with your fighting games to make it look really on point, and I think this is another reason why I really want to see Marvel vs. Capcom come back, is because I've seen how we've made leaps and bounds with the graphics and the art directions in all of these games. I'm imagining a Marvel vs. Capcom with these kinds of aesthetics. I would like to reference an image that was drawn by I think it's Murata, the guy who created One Punch Man. Apologies if I got his name wrong. I think it's Murata-san. He drew this picture and it ended up in my Twitter feed one day. Somebody was talking about it. I can't remember who it was, but I just remember the tweet talking about this art. And that person said, man, wouldn't it be so cool if Street Fighter 6's art style and graphic direction looked like this. And it started a debate in the comments to that tweet. People were saying that Street Fighter is too stylized, it can't lean so heavily into anime manga because it starts to take something away from Street Fighter's unique and individualistic visual presentation, which is kind of true. Like, when I look at the Street Fighter series specifically, the most that Capcom heavily leaned into the anime look was with the Street Fighter Alpha series, and even then, even though they were sort of going in the anime route with Street Fighter Alpha, they still kind of held back in some aspects to sort of keep it looking unique. They didn't want to give it a complete manga anime makeover, but they were sort of utilizing a lot of visual style from the anime manga look. But as Street Fighter as a series, to lean so heavily into the anime manga style wouldn't really work for a mainline Street Fighter game. However, I personally believe that this style that you're looking at now, this artwork that you're looking at now, personally, I think it is the perfect look for a Marvel vs. Capcom game. And I'll tell you why. I know some of you are going to be heavily against this. Some people out there just really don't like the anime manga aesthetic. And I can give or take with the anime manga look, depending on what it's being used for. But there's a reason I honestly think that this art style that you're looking at right now is perfect for Marvel vs. Capcom. For Marvel vs. Capcom, you are literally talking about combat between two characters, between a team of characters, combat taking place within a cartoon comic book world. Marvel is comics. Marvel is comic books, yeah? Marvel are comics and cartoons, okay? The cinematic universe is now a very, very big part of it, but we're talking about a point in time where it wasn't. We weren't talking about Marvel movies. We were talking about Marvel cartoons and Marvel comics, and that's when this series began. And this is why I think, you know, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite kind of went in the wrong direction by placing its sort of visual aesthetic on the movies. Nah, leave the movies alone. Don't lean into the movie side of it. Don't lean into the movie aspects. Leave the MCU to do what the MCU is doing. I love the MCU. I'm in the cinema watching these movies. I've got Disney Plus, motherfucker. I am absolutely in love with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it is the absolute wrong call to use those elements and those aesthetic qualities for Marvel vs. Capcom. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. Dragon Ball FighterZ. Someone put up a screenshot of Piccolo in my Twitter feed, and I'm just scrolling and I see a screenshot of Piccolo, and I'm genuinely I'm looking at it. First initial reaction of looking at Piccolo in this screenshot, and I'm like, oh, it's from a cartoon. It's probably from the anime or something, or another movie. They're making another movie, whatever. And then they were like, no, this is from the game. The game looks like a cartoon now. The game looks like an actual anime. You play this. You play this, and Guilty Gear's been doing this shit. It looks like you are playing a cartoon fighting game. It looks like an actual cartoon. It looks like an actual anime. Marvel vs. Capcom is perfect for this style. It's perfect for this style because you've got the perfect marriage. You are literally saying Marvel is a comic book creation. They are specialized in cartoon and comic book aesthetics. You've got the Japanese side of it, which is anime and manga. It's there, the perfect marriage between cartoons and comics and anime and manga. Marvel vs. Capcom. Art style is, you know, give or take. Not everyone's going to agree with you. But I just really feel like for a game that is based on a comic book company fighting a video game company, it's rooted in the source. It's rooted, the art style, the manga and anime art style is rooted right in this. It would be the perfect time right now. You've got games like Dragon Ball FighterZ, you've got games like Guilty Gear Strive. Marvel vs. Capcom lends itself superbly well to that visual aesthetic. It would look brilliant for this series because this series is all about over the top. Everything's over the top. The moves are over the top. The character combinations are over the top. Everything's nuts. It's supposed to be nuts. So bring it back to the over the topness. Bring it back to the comics. Bring it back to the anime and the manga. Bring it back by utilizing this visual aesthetic that you see in Guilty Gear Strive and Dragon Ball FighterZ. I'm daydreaming like a dickhead, but it's going to look so sick.
That's enough of you. I wanna take you for a ride. I wanna take you for a ride.
In terms of content, I mean, for Marvel vs. Capcom 4, I don't really want to see a cinematic story mode, which is wild because I'm the guy that absolutely loves playing games for their story. But the thing is, I've noticed that ever since fighting games started doing cinematic story modes, like a good 50% of some of these games, their story modes haven't been hitting. Like Street Fighter 5 story mode is garbage, I'm sorry. You know, it doesn't work. As I said, I'm a solo player, I'm a single player person. So when I play a fighting game, I'm usually doing arcade routes. I'm usually playing arcade ladders. And I used to like it back in the day where you would complete an arcade ladder, and at the end of that arcade ladder, you would get a character ending. And the thing is, Marvel vs. Capcom did this. It done it in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. You'd complete an arcade route, and then you'd get this sort of comic book page layout, and you'd get a small ending. And to me, as a single player, as a solo player person, that's the kind of reward I'm looking for. I've selected a character from a roster based on the fact that I like that character, how that character looks, or I like how that character plays. I'm going to go and play an arcade route now, and at the end of that arcade route, I want to be rewarded something based on that character. I've chosen that character for a reason. I would like to be rewarded something for playing as that character. So character endings, I think, are better for Marvel vs. Capcom than having a cinematic story mode. I don't think Marvel vs. Capcom 4 needs to have a cinematic story at all. Don't do it. Just have your arcade ladder, and at the end of that arcade ladder, have your character specific endings, and I'll be fine with that. And I know most single players are going to be fine with that. And the online warriors are not even going to pay attention to that shit. They're going to be playing online anyway. So you're just going to be Capcom would just be wasting money making a cinematic story mode because nobody really needs it. Just stick to your character specific endings, and everyone's going to be fine with that, and you're going to save a bunch of money in the process as well, I'd imagine. You'd probably save a good chunk of money without having to invest money into motion capture and tons of voice dialogue, and stick to your character endings. I appreciate those. I'm sure other people do. We don't really need a cinematic story mode for Marvel vs. Capcom 4. And the thing is, I mean, I'm talking about a potential idea of what I would like Marvel vs. Capcom 4 to be like. But if I start talking about the characters that I would love to see in this hypothetical game, this video is going to go on for an hour because there's so many characters that I could choose from. There's tons. There's tons. We could be talking about Rival School characters and Power Stone characters, and we could talk about this and talk about that. I would probably go nuts with it. So I regretfully am going to limit myself in this video, and I'm going to say I'm not going to talk about character roster in this video because Marvel vs. Capcom 4 doesn't exist, okay? If it does, if at some point, a couple of years down the line, Capcom go, alright, we're making a Marvel vs. Capcom 4, I will make a video then. I will absolutely pour my guts out on what characters I would like to see in Marvel vs. Capcom 4. But I don't think I should do it now. I've literally written it in my script right here. I'll be like, you know what, don't talk about this now. Your video is going to go on for an hour and a half. So, you know, I'm not going to do it now. But I've got ideas. I would love to see certain characters, and I think I'm going to save it. I'm going to save that topic for the day that Marvel vs. Capcom 4 actually becomes a reality. But yeah, sound off in the comments. Just let me know what you would like to see in a hypothetical Marvel vs. Capcom 4. Say the planets aligned and somebody had all the fucking Infinity Stones and they were like, alright, so yeah, I'm going to make Marvel vs. Capcom 4, yeah? What do you want in it? What do you want? Do you want something from here? Do you want some of that sprinkled in? What do you want? So they're gonna just wish Marvel vs. Capcom 4 into existence. If that was to happen, what would you want to see in that game? You can even talk about character roster. I know I didn't do it in this video, but you can name characters. Fuck it, I don't care. I just want to know what you guys would love to see in a Marvel vs. Capcom 4. I'm DigiValentine. Thanks for your time. Take care and stay safe.